The Prime Minister answered calls today to apologize for a Nazi war veteran being honored at Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky's address to Parliament. But as you saw there, the opposition isn't satisfied. Did the apology then go far enough to blunt the diplomatic damage? Let's bring in the front bench to talk about that. Elliot Hughes is a political commentator and senior associate with Summa Strategies. He's a former senior advisor to Liberal finance and defence ministers. Former Alberta MLA and cabinet minister Gary Marr is with us. He's the president and CEO of the Canada West Foundation now. Anne McGrath is the national director of the NDP, and Laura Stone is a Queen's Park reporter for the Globe and Mail. Hi, everybody. Happy Wednesday. Laura, I'll start with you. Is this a case of it's never too late to apologize, or did the timing of the Prime Minister's apology kind of open him up to the criticism that he's been on the receiving end of for the past number of days?
I think the Prime Minister clearly wanted to let the dust settle somewhat before he issued the apology. And firstly, what had to happen was Speaker Rota had to resign. And we saw there was certainly some resistance there from the Speaker, which seemed to drag it out a bit. I think what's happening now, though, is this is going beyond the international considerations. I think, apologizing on behalf of Canada and parliamentarians probably does enough to satisfy the international community now. I think what's happening here with the opposition and between Prime Minister Trudeau really is a case of domestic politics at play. And you can see the Conservatives trying to paint the Prime Minister as incompetent, as arrogant, really trying to pin this on him personally. And obviously you see how the Prime Minister is resisting that. So I think, on an international level, I think there's probably some satisfaction here from the community. Now this is really resorting back to kind of the cut and thrust of the House of Commons and the domestic dynamics at play.
Do you think that, Anne, that it has sort of satisfied or will go towards satisfying or, I guess, assuring the international community around this issue? And second, do you think that the domestic side of this will abate anytime soon, or do you feel that the Prime Minister has opened himself up to criticism domestically?
Well, I mean, I think if he wants it to be abated internationally, he has to actually do something, right? So I think you can acknowledge that it is not the Prime Minister's fault and that the Speaker took responsibility for it, but just because it isn't necessarily his fault doesn't mean that he doesn't bear responsibility for dealing with the consequences. And the consequences go beyond apologizing in the House. That's a good step. But it's been 3 days now, and that's a long time for an international incident of this sort to just sort of linger. So I think that there should have been, I think it should have been dealt with more urgently. And even today, I didn't have the sense that he had even talked to President Zelensky.
He has not. I asked many times Minister Golden.
Well, there you go.
She wouldn't say no directly, but she said a lot of other people on diplomatic channels have, but not him
So,
directly.
I mean, there are major consequences to what happened. And while, I don't think running around looking for, I mean, I think, we accept at his word that the Speaker said it was his fault and he took responsibility and he did the right thing. It took him too long. And then it took the Prime Minister too long. And I think that's the problem. And then, of course, dealing with the consequences. The Jewish community has been very much harmed by this, the Jewish community in Canada, but I think internationally. It certainly gave a lot of ammunition to Russia in their occupation of Ukraine and their basically their hostility, their armed hostility against Ukraine. So
it is a bit surprising, Gary, putting aside sort of the who's to blame domestic political argument, that when the Prime Minister did make the apology today, there weren't more concrete things laid out. And I say that only having interviewed so many of the, for example, Jewish groups, advocacy groups who felt very hurt by what unfolded and the very specific things they've asked for to, begin the process of remedying it. Again, this is not like assigning blame, but simply like, getting up and saying, I'm going to call President Zelensky, or this person has called this minister, here's my apology, and here's the plan going forth to make sure, something like this never happens again. That second half was kind of missing today.
I agree, first of all, with a lot of what Anne said with respect to how this came about. And what does surprise me is, the amount of protocol that goes on when a head of state is coming to visit your country is extraordinary. When Her Majesty the Queen attended upon Parliament, when President Biden attended upon Parliament. There's a lot of protocol that goes on that appears to have not been expressed this time around. I think Speaker Rota was doing a game day decision, and his decision was a wrong one. And in the past, back in 1985, Prime Minister Mulroney had commission, the Deschênes Commission, to look at the issue of Nazis that had come to Canada to seek refuge following the Second World War, and the Waffen SS division that the guest that the constituent of Mr. Rhoda had had been with that division. So it's really good to have people who have corporate memory and understand protocol. I don't think that this would have happened if under President Biden's visit, but there seems to have been a lapse in the ability to remember things from the past and how you should do things in the future. So that, in addition to the appropriate apologies to Jewish groups, and a lot of work has got to be done to repair this, and it is a deep problem. I don't think we should understate the significance of how this diminishes Canada's diplomatic reputation around the world.
Yeah, I think from a strategic point of view, why the Liberals, for example, Elliot, would not want to give the opposition more ammunition along the lines of the argument around culpability. But again, sort of if they were to say, hey, this is protocol, but clearly there was a lapse in the protocol, right? Like the fact that this even happened, again, we're not saying, the speaker said he did it himself. We're not saying that we had any role in it, but maybe it's like the opportune time to figure out if that needs to change the next time President Zelensky or another head of state is here in Canada. But they, like in the interview I conducted with Minister Gould, she would not even even come anywhere close to that. I think you're on mute. My apologies.
My apologies. Thank you for that. My sense is the government is trying to figure out what to do next. I think they've been caught flat-footed, and they don't really have a plan at the moment, and they seem to be improvising a little bit. I would completely agree that there are going to be changes. There will be changes, and I think and I expect the Prime Minister to lay them out in the coming days and weeks. It's unfortunate that they haven't come yet. The other political fallout to this, to me, is 2 points. One, these issues continually put the Prime Minister on the back foot politically and provide the leader of the opposition with the chance to sort of take on the offensive and to go after him. Most of us know that it's Anthony Rhoda whose decision it was, and he says that it was his fault and so on. But to be, let's be clear, most Canadians don't know that. Most Canadians don't know how the Parliament works. And so there's an understanding from their side that, look, Parliament is government is Justin Trudeau, it's his fault, he needs to fix it. And I think the Conservatives are playing on that. And frankly, that's their job and they need to do that. So, between the fact that they need to come up with some answers in the near future, the fact that it's distracting the government from their own messaging, they had a big announcement yesterday that was completely lost. The more time they're talking about some of these challenges, the less time they're talking about things like housing affordability and the issues that really matter to Canadians at a time when the government can't really afford to be wasting these efforts.